Hello, everyone. My name is I use she, they pronouns. I am a Master's of Social Work student currently completing my placement with Community Health Centers of Northumberland. And I am here to talk to you about anxiety. This is part two of our Coping with Anxiety mini workshop series. Um, in this video, we are really going to dive into ways that we can cope with anxiety now that we understand what anxiety is. So let's get into it. The first thing I like to say is remember that coping strategies are not at all one size fits all. What works for one person does not necessarily work for someone else for a medley of reasons, and this is okay. So I encourage you to take what makes sense for you from this video and leave what doesn't. Starting with the anxiety cycle, I think this is really a helpful way to illustrate how anxiety manifests and grows over time. So, starting right at the top here in terms of perceiving danger, this is often where our anxiety is beginning. Because as we spoke about in the last video, our anxiety is trying to keep us safe from danger. So, when we perceive danger, we're worrying about a potential threat, potential danger, we inherently think it will be negative. And so we experience some uncomfortable symptoms like we're worried, we're fearful, maybe our heart is racing, we might be sweating, we might be feeling overwhelmed. These aren't super pleasant symptoms and emotions and sensations in our body. So, what's the logical thing to do? Avoid the danger or potential danger or anxiety inducing situation that is giving us those uncomfortable sensations. So, in avoiding things, we try to control and manage our uncomfortable symptoms of anxiety by just completely avoiding whatever it is that's causing us anxiety. It makes sense. We might avoid by skipping a work or social event. We also might avoid by numbing, so using alcohol or other substances to numb our feelings, or we might procrastinate on tasks that make us anxious. Moving into that next sort of stage here, through avoiding those unpleasant sensations, avoiding that thing that's making us anxious, we experience brief relief because that avoidance of the situation making us anxious gives us an immediate sense of like those symptoms are able to lessen. We're able to take a deep breath. But this is only temporary because our anxiety in this next stage grows over time, over the long term. The fear that led us to avoiding the situation in the first place gets worse. And the brain learns that when the anxiety inducing situation is avoided, the symptoms go away. So, next time, the symptoms of anxiety will likely be worse, and we might be more likely to avoid the situation again. And thus, the cycle repeats itself, and anxiety begins to grow over time. So, I like to start by talking about self awareness and talking about anxiety prevention because we are going to dive into ways to cope with anxiety, but ways to prevent it are also important. So, self awareness is a way of shifting your awareness apart from what is happening around you and onto yourself to determine what is going on inside of you. Instead of focusing on what other people do and say, the emphasis is really placed on how you think and how you feel. The thing about self awareness that helps is it really allows us to step back and observe our thoughts and feelings as they arise and unfold. So we're able to notice the emotions that we feel when we try something new, the feelings that we get when we see friends, the feelings we're experiencing when we're out for a drive. Through self awareness, we can discover new things about ourselves. Like we feel happy after spending time with a certain friend, but we feel exhausted after spending time with another friend. Once we're discovering these new things about ourselves, we can better assess what our needs are and also what triggers our anxiety. So, self awareness can help us manage anxiety by stopping it in its tracks. We can learn to notice anxious feelings and thoughts as they arise and deal with them right away instead of letting it sort of fester and grow into a bigger thing. We can also work to change situations that cause us anxiety. In order to practice self awareness, we have to balance this work with self care and self compassion. And so this can include doing things that bring you joy and connecting with others in ways that feel good and with people that feel good to have around. We might take care of our body through stretching and massage and work on meeting your needs the best you can. So, eating nourishing food if you have access to that, moving your body in ways that feel really great to you, and resting. Self awareness can help us learn the things that trigger our anxiety. And it's important to know that we don't have control over bodily and brain reactions to situations, but we do have choice over what happens next. And so having awareness over our triggers is the first step in this process. So to work on identifying your own anxiety triggers, it's helpful to think about what tends to make you anxious or what tends to push your buttons. Where are the times that you are overcome with an intense emotional reaction? And then writing these triggers down. So maybe you notice you get really stressed out driving on the 401 or talking about politics with a particular friend. Right? Recognizing these triggers and writing them down and noticing when they come up is the first step in anxiety prevention. So, in terms of coping with anxiety, shifting a little bit more onto reacting instead of prevention, it's helpful to recognize the four parts of anxiety. So there's physical symptoms. This is how our body responds. There's thoughts. So this is sort of what we say to ourselves in our own heads, not necessarily out loud. We have emotions. So this is how we feel. And then behavior. So what we do, what our actions are. Learning to recognize these signs of anxiety can help us become less afraid of it. So these signs can look like, in terms of physical symptoms, um, maybe you notice a stomach ache or a cold sweat or your heart racing. Your thoughts might be, what if I forget to say this thing when I go to my appointment? Your emotions could be, I'm feeling scared. And behaviors might be of that avoidance, avoiding a situation that you just don't want to deal with that's giving you stress and anxiety. In terms of our coping strategies that we're offering for you today, we're breaking them down into those categories. So I'm going to start with calming the physical symptoms of anxiety, really addressing these physical experiences, sensations that we get. So, in learning to identify the physical signs of anxiety for you, it's really about thinking, what happens when I'm anxious? Where do I feel anxiety in my body? And spending time pondering this. The strategies that can be helpful in calming our physical symptoms of anxiety include practicing breathing exercises. So, I like box breathing, deep breathing. We can include some resources in the video that offer you some instruction in doing these breathing exercises, but you can also Google them, and there are lots out there. Calming music can be extremely helpful. Candlelight and scents, grounding exercises. So we're going to go into one on the next slide. And these grounding exercises alert our brain to safety. And so they can be very effective in producing a little bit of calmness in terms of those physical symptoms. We might engage in mindfulness and meditation, and we might practice relaxation in whatever way works for you. So, having some quiet time, doing some visualization, maybe doing muscle relaxation. The grounding exercise I'm going to offer to you is called the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. And so this is a way to engage all of our senses and sort of ground us in the present moment and alert our brain to safety based on our physical environment. So I encourage you to take some time. Maybe you want to do this exercise while I'm running through it. Maybe you want to come to it later. The goal is to purposefully take in the details of what is surrounding you. So, what are 5 things that you can see? Look around your environment, whatever room you're in, maybe you're outside, for small details like a pattern on the ceiling, or the way the light reflects off of the surface, or an object that you've never noticed before. And once you've found those 5 things, what are 4 things that you can feel? Notice the sensation of clothing on your body or the feeling of the chair you're sitting in if you're sitting down. Pick up an object and examine its weight, its texture, any other physical qualities. And once you've done that, what are 3 things you can hear? Just pay special attention to the sounds your mind has tuned out. So, a ticking clock, or distant traffic, or trees, the leaves blowing in the wind. Once you've identified those 3 things, think about what are 2 things you can smell. So try to notice the smells in the air around you, like an air freshener or freshly mown grass. You may also look around for something that has a scent, and you might want to smell that, like a flower or a candle. And on this picture, it says, name one good thing about yourself. And that's a great one that you can do. Another one that you can do that engages your final sense is, what is one thing you can taste? So you might carry gum and or candy or a small snack for this step, and just pop it into your mouth and focus on, what are the flavors? How does this feel in my mouth? Um, Even just taking a sip of water and focusing on that can be really grounding and alert your brain to safety. Moving into addressing anxious thoughts. So, in learning to identify anxious thoughts, it's important to recognize that these typically involve a fear of something bad happening in the future. So, the future could be in 5 minutes, could be in 5 days, could be in 5 years. Strategies that can be helpful in addressing anxious thoughts include staying in the present moment and finding ways to do this, because anxiety is often pushing us to ruminate on the past or worry about the future. So, staying in the present moment as much as you can be helpful, and grounding exercises, as we just did, can help you with that. Journaling or other ways to release your anxious thoughts can be really impactful. So, writing or drawing your anxious thoughts or your anxiety on a sticky note or on paper, and then deciding what you want to do with them. Do you want to burn that paper in a safe way? Do you want to rip that paper up? Do you want to make art out of it? Do you want to keep those anxieties in a jar and revisit them in a few months and see where you're at with those? Containment or worry time is another interesting idea that you could try. So, this is intentionally giving yourself a set amount of time to think about your anxious thoughts. Really, you're putting worry time into your schedule, usually 5 to 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes maximum, at the same time, same place, every day. And then we can use words and sounds or actions to start and stop the worry time. So we might start it with, okay, this is my time to feel my anxiety. And after that timer is up, whether you did 5 minutes or 10 minutes, just say to yourself, I felt my worries. It's now time to move on with my day. If you feel anxious thoughts arising outside of your worry or containment time, remind yourself that you will deal with them later during your worry time. And you might be surprised that you will forget some of those anxious thoughts that arose during the day when you get to your worry time, because in the moment, anxiety feels extremely crushing and like it's never going to end. But once we're able to sort of put that aside, it often subsides. Another strategy is disrupting negative or anxious self talk and practicing positive self talk, because anxiety can make you underestimate your ability to handle a situation that feels scary. So try to think of different interpretations of the situation that's making you anxious instead of jumping to what ifs. What ifs are our brain trying to deal with uncertainty. And by trying to prepare for uncertainty by imagining all of the possible scenarios through what ifs, we're actually causing ourselves more anxiety than if we had just found comfort in that uncertainty of life. So, speaking to yourself in a really kind and compassionate way, like you would speak to a close friend, can be a helpful way to sort of guide yourself out of this place. There are also lots of apps that can help you to address your anxious thoughts. And then finally, coping statements. So, this is a helpful way also to speak to yourself in a positive way. Coping statements can be anything, but we've included a few, such as, I can handle these symptoms or sensations. I'll just let my body do its thing. This will pass. And I've survived this before, and I'll survive it again. So I've included a few ideas here in terms of more creative ways to deal with our anxiety. And two are videos from Erica Pang, who is an art therapist on YouTube. I will ensure that I include the link to her channel in our description because she has lots of videos that offer us really concrete ways to release our anxiety. In coping with anxious behaviors, learning to recognize our anxious behaviors is the first step, as always. Often, anxiety makes us believe we're in danger, and so our behavior might show up as avoidance or wanting to escape a situation. And so, addressing anxious behaviors is really about targeting that tendency to avoid anxiety inducing situations. So, first, noticing situations that you tend to avoid because of anxiety. Are there ways that you can adapt these situations to make them feel safer or more accessible to you? Maybe bringing a friend or a safe person with you, bringing a token of strength, like a sticky note with a quote that you really love on it, or something special to you. Anything that can really support and ground you in these moments where you feel anxious. Another strategy is taking small acts of bravery. So this is recognizing that avoiding what makes you anxious might provide that short-term relief, as is in the anxiety cycle, but it can make you more anxious in the long term. So approaching smaller things that make you anxious, but less anxious than other things, can be a really helpful way to practice coping with your anxiety in lower stakes situations and eventually build your way up to doing things that are scarier. Another strategy is asking for help. So I completely recognize that asking for help can be so incredibly hard, but also sharing our experience with people that we feel safe with can be really helpful. So, talking to a friend or a trusted healthcare professional, a family, or even someone anonymously on a telephone support line can be extremely beneficial in sharing our anxious feelings and addressing those behaviors of avoidance. And finally, making a plan and having strategies to help you relax and calm down when you are doing something that causes you anxiety will really benefit you in doing the things that are scary. So, using a breathing or grounding exercise that you like, doing what you can to prepare beforehand, or bringing a support person. In coping with emotions related to anxiety, this one's difficult because emotions can feel big and scary. When we are feeling anxious, when we're feeling triggered, we may have an intense emotional reaction. And noticing those emotions that arise from you and what those emotions might be telling you is really helpful. So, when you are experiencing a big emotional reaction in relation to anxiety, these steps are very helpful. So, engaging in grounding, so that 5 4 3 2 1 technique or another grounding exercise, being kind to yourself. So, engaging in self compassion, which is treating and talking to yourself as you would someone that you really love and care about, like a close friend. And finally, using emotional awareness skill, which we are going to get into right now. So, this emotion wheel is taken from a really wonderful guide that we will put into the link that was created on tolerating uncertainty during the COVID-19 pandemic. But it's something that you can use during the pandemic, outside of the pandemic, for all emotional awareness. So, the steps that are identified in that guide for emotional awareness include noticing and observing as step one. So, recognizing what physical sensations are you experiencing? What's going on in your body that's alerting you to the fact that you're having um, an emotional experience, an emotional reaction to something. The second is labeling the emotion. So we have this emotion wheel here on the right side of the screen. So using this wheel or a similar wheel, recognizing what feeling on that wheel this sensation or sensations that you're feeling in your body, what they fit with. Are you feeling anticipation? Are you feeling anger or rage? Are you feeling sadness? Are you feeling surprise? The third is adopt or allow, recognizing that we have to ask ourselves if we can accept this emotion. If we can't accept this emotion, it's helpful to remember that emotions pass through us quite quickly. It feels like anxiety that they're going to stay long term, and often they do not. So, in thinking about adopting and or allowing an emotion, if you can't allow it, what do you need to do to take care of yourself until it passes? The fourth is very much connected to this. So, need. What is that emotion alerting you to? We can understand emotions as telling us about unmet needs that we have. So, this is something that we're going to focus on in the next slide as well. But thinking about what unmet need might be arising for you as you experience this emotion. And finally, action. What do you need to do to fulfill this need? This is a really wonderful graphic that was created by Wholehearted Therapy, and it's sort of talking about this need that an emotion can alert us to. So this is giving us just some options, but you could create a chart on your own and think about what needs your emotions are pointing you to. So, sadness might be telling us that we need to cry, loneliness might be telling us that we need connection, shame might be telling us that we need self compassion, resentment might be telling us that we need to forgive, emptiness might be telling us that we need to do something creative. Anger might be telling us that we need to check in with our boundaries. Anxiety might be telling us that we need to breathe, and stress might be telling us that we need to take it one step at a time. Thank you so much for sticking around, for watching this video. I hope that you were able to take a few coping strategies that you're eager to try out. And if they don't work, watch it again and see if there's anything else that you're able to pick up on that could be helpful. Hope that you take good care.